Okay, today we are going to discuss master data and purchase requisition, and we'll be understanding the data flow, the master data, the requisition PR that is called request for quotation. RFQ's request for quotation release strategy. Release strategy is basically important for interviews and for implementations. Usually they ask questions about this, but we'll understand everything. Okay, the data flow in MM is quite straightforward. We actually determine requirements like what material do we want, okay, in what quantity, in what month, at what day, okay, and from whom at what price. That is the requirement. Simple. So then when the requirements are planned, okay, and you decide, yes, okay, we'll start with this raw material, this semi-finished good, and this and that, and you make a list of all the material that you want or stock that you want or whatever. You will have a long list in a manufacturing company and an enterprise. Okay. Once those requirements are planned with the quantities, with time, duration, the dates, then we determine the source. What is a source? The vendor. So if I'm ordering like pen, a writing pen or a paper, then of course I'll have many sources, many vendors. Some vendors will give me a different quality, some vendors will deliver me quicker, some vendors will give me a good price, some vendor will give me credit, some will give me free goods. Yeah, so that source has to be determined, that what is the best source out of all this. And then after the source is determined, and then of course not every vendor will supply you the whole requirement. Some can supply, like big companies, but their determination, their policies are different. Okay, they might actually ask for advance upfront, but middle size or small companies will have different set of requirements. They would prefer doing business in cash and quantity. So what actually matters is time, money, and quantity. These are three factors that will make you to decide what source is best. Okay. Then we select the vendor. And once it is selected, we create a purchase order. Once the purchase order is set, we send the purchase order to vendor, and then we follow up. We give them reminders. And once the goods are dispatched from the vendor's side, the goods are then received at our destination. This is where the finance entry is generated. And then we create an invoice, which is created against the purchase order reference. Okay, so that is the data flow. Simple. So if we extend our discussion in data flow, the MRP, which is the material requirement planning, it triggers the requirements that we discussed over here, the first part. Then the purchase requisition is released. So purchase requisition is a request. Okay. And if there is a quota-based system in the company, then source is identified, then the vendor is selected, purchase order is prepared, and then we push the vendor for supplies. We receive goods, and then we receive the invoice from the vendor and we pay the vendor. Okay. So in SAP, we have this data flow to perform these activities. Okay, so let's discuss about the specific master data for MM. So there are like two types of data. One is master data, the other is transaction data. Master data is the backbone. The master data is the identity of a material. Okay. Without master data, transactions are not possible. So what are the different types of master data? Material master, vendor master, purchase info record. We'll discuss and configure this. Source listing, quota arrangement. We'll discuss all of this and we'll configure all of this. Transaction data is the next one. That's created when we are executing a transaction. Transaction data are created with input from master data. Okay. And what is the example for transaction data? That's purchase requisition, purchase order, good receipt, invoice verification. These are transactions that happen in the books of the company. So specifically, the master data that we will be looking into is material master, vendor master, source listings, quote arrangement, purchase info record, purchasing group. Okay. And if we talk about material master, of course, we've already seen that. Vendor master is basically we maintain the address, the vendor type, the vendor group, vendor names, their bank details, and stuff like that. Source list basically is nothing but you actually mention the vendor and you mention what material can that vendor supply us. And then we arrange for the quota. For example, there are three vendors we have shortlisted. One vendor can supply you like 100 kg. The other vendor can supply you only 70 kg. The third supplier will supply like 300 kg. So every vendor will have their conditions. And based on that, we can select our vendor from the source list and using quota arrangement. Purchase info record, of course, this is very important. The important part of the whole cycle of the purchasing and MM cycle. Purchase info record is used for costing also. Then we have purchasing group. Okay, the purchasing group is basically responsible for purchasing goods for various categories like raw materials, services, semi-finished good, consulting, or banks, or those are the purchasing groups. Okay, so employees will be running purchasing groups and they will be given the task to purchase certain segment or category of the group. Material master, it contains entire information of the material. We've already seen that. Purchasing related information are stored in purchasing view. We've already seen the views. We'll see it again. Today we'll discuss this. So in purchasing, what do we see? We see that what details are available for person responsible to buy or purchase. What is the base unit of measure? For example, kg, each, liters, tons. These are units of measuring, units of measurement. Okay, the petrol is in liters and cartons are in packs or each in pallets. Okay. The cloth is in yards or meters. That is unit of measure. Okay. Then plant specific material status, whether the plant is blocked or not, whether it's in inspection or not, that is material status. What is the processing time for good receipts? So sometimes when you actually receive goods at your factory, it actually goes through a process of quality check. That is the processing time for good receipt. Quota arrangement, as I told you, quota arrangement is where you actually set the quantities against the vendor with the dates at what dates they would be supplying you the material. And then, of course, the source list. We'll be seeing every of these. Batch management, this is also very important and very easy. But this is very vital in material management. Vendor master, what does it actually contain? It has name, address, bank details, contact person, payment terms, and things like that. Vendor master record has three parts: accounting data, purchasing data, general data, and these are the details that go into the vendor master record. So what are the roles of a vendor? Now, vendor can be your goods supplier, it can be your order recipient, it can be your invoicing party, it can be your bank as well. So there are various categories of vendors. It's not only that they only supply goods, and employees can be your vendor because they are giving you services. Okay, so one vendor actually gets the purchase order, the other is the invoicing party, the principal. The mother company will send you the invoice, the subsidiary will send you the order, the supplies. Okay, the supplier will be, of course, can be somebody else or the same. Okay. Source list. Now, what is a source list? It's the list of available sources of supply. It facilitates determination of source. automatic assignments of source to PR. It contains validity period for each vendor, as I told you earlier. And in source list, we have these elements. It basically is maintained manually, and it is also maintained to honor outline agreement. Now, what is outline agreement? Agreement is like that I enter into an agreement with the vendor that for the next 3 months, the vendor would supply me 100 tons of chemical after every 10 days, or when the stocks actually fall below 50 tons, right? So automatically there is an agreement. So I don't have to actually issue a purchase order every time because I have an agreement with the vendor. And source list is also influencing purchase info record. Will go into purchase info record and we'll see what makes an info record. And we can also generate source listing for further future use. Okay. So basically it's used for requisition and that is then carried into the purchase order. Okay. So it's pretty much connected and automatic. Okay. Source determination. This is the order of priority to search the source. First, the system will search for a quota. If there is a quota that is set with the vendor, it will search that. So this is the sequence. Then it will search the source list and then it will go for the purchase info record to determine what source is the best. Okay. Now, moving forward, how to determine the source? Quota arrangements, as I told you, one vendor is having like capacity of 100 tons, the other has 50 tons, the third one has 300 tons. Okay. So based on your requirement, you will actually select what vendor is best. Then the second step is source list. In source list, of course, you mention the materials along with the vendor at what date, what quantity the vendor can supply what quantity of goods. For example, my requirement is 50 tons this week, but my vendor has the capacity to only supply like 35 tons. 15 will be still short. Okay, so based on our agreement and source listing, we have to actually see where we can reach an agreement with that vendor. And then we have an agreement item. Okay, and the vendor cannot actually bypass it or ignore it. Okay, and info record, of course, we have conditions, payment terms, quantities, and conversion rates for the material, for the currency. Yeah. Quota arrangement, it contains vendor, the quota percentage it can fill up. For example, my requirement is 100 tons, but one vendor can only supply me like 30% of that 100 ton. Okay. So you will actually have to adjust another vendor or two more vendors. Okay. Then it also has minimum maximum lot size. How much can a vendor allow us and what is the minimum requirements to order from? For example, from 100 tons, I might want like 10 tons in one supply and 20 tons in another. So there would be a minimum that the vendor will set. Some vendors will say, no, we can only supply 50 tons at a time. Some will say 100 tons in one time. Some will say 5 tons. So there will be a minimum maximum lot size. Okay. And there will of course will be a validity period because prices change, quality changes. There will be because validity period is also important because vendors are engaged with other customers. They might actually unlock their supplies and supply it to the customer. So there will be a validity period to lock that duration to supply you the material, right? Quota arrangement. So vendor is determined on the basis of lowest rating result of the following formula, which is base quantity plus quota minus allocated quantity and divided by quota. Okay. Quota minus allocated quantity. So quota is 300 tons. Allocated quantity is like 100 tons. And the base quantity, of course, the base quantity that you want is 10 tons in one supply. Yeah. So base quantity is to regulate quota arrangement without changing quota. So prerequisite quota usage must be maintained in the material master purchasing view. Purchase info record, it's created for combination material vendor and purchase organization. Purchase info record data has some parts like general data, control data, text, prices and conditions, price history. So in general data, we have vendor data, origin data, ordering unit. Ordering unit is like liters or tons or kgs or millimeters or meters, right? Control data is the delivery time, minimum quantity, tolerances. Tolerances is basically supplier has minimum quantity of 10 tons, but during during the supply, the 10 tons can reduce to like 9.8 tons or 9.9 because of some wastage, okay, or some damage, okay. So those are tolerances. It can be over tolerance and under tolerance, okay. Prices and conditions, what will be the gross price, what will be discount, what will be the freight charges, and there will be price history which is attached with the purchase info record. Purchasing group is basically responsible for specific purchasing activities. It represents the buyer. It is used for reporting, okay. So purchase requisition is a request for material and services. It is the first trigger to procure. It is generated automatically or manually. Item category and account assignment are important. In PR, we'll discuss this. Item category is it controls requirement of material, number, account assignment. Now, account assignment means whether you want it for your production, you want it for your cost center, you want it as an asset. For example, you want an item or a material for cost center or for production order or to use it as an asset. So that is account assignment. Whether to place in stock or not, requirement of GRIR. Now, what is GRIR? Good receipt, invoice receipt. Okay. So when you receive goods, it's GR. When you receive the invoice, it is IR. So it is a very important concept in finance and material management. So item category, standard item, consignment item, text, third party, these are the items. So items can be stock material, consumable. In consumable, of course, it can be single material, multiple account assignment. Item category can be standard, like for example, just a simple item that I want, like I want a calculator. A consignment item is basically it's a consignment that is sent by vendor to you, and that is a batch or a lot which has certain fixed items, and it has a quantity which gets used until it is used completely. That consignment belongs to the vendor. Okay. Okay. So consumable material or stock material, this is how it can be used. Okay. For consumable material, of course, you will have account assignment. For consumable, of course, you wanted to consume it to production order or cost center. Okay. For stock material, of course, you don't need account assignment because this is stock, it will be stored in the warehouse. So whether you are using consumer for cost center, project, sales order, or asset, as I told you earlier, account assignment will directly debit the cost of procurement to those objects. For example, if account assignment is F to indicate production order, cost of procurement will be debited to production order. Okay, so these are some item category, account assignments that we'll see when we create a purchase requisition, purchase order. Account categories, asset, sales order, production order. So these are symbols that are set by SAP. Okay. Asset, sales order, cost center, project. Now, what is basically used is this one, production order. Okay. Account assignment. Now, what is account assignment? Basically, account assignment, basically you have stock material with material master record, and then we assign it to an account with account category, or it will have an automatic account assignment from material master record, and then it is basically influencing the stock account. So basically the concept over here is that whenever you have a stock material, whether it is raw material, services, or semi-finished good or whatever, it will have to hit and influence the stock account in the finance. So in order to determine what will be the account assignment, we need to actually determine whether it's a stock item or consumable, and based on that, it will then charge to the stock account. With account category, of course, you enter the category. It can be a consumption account or asset account. For consumable material with master record, account category will be there, and that is what? As I told you earlier, account category can be asset or cost center or whatever. It can be used for that consumable material to consume it. So what is consumable material? That is basically you will be using it for your own purpose in the factory. It will not be considered as stock. It will be considered as your own consumable material that you will consume for your own purpose. How to create requisition manually? Department 1, Department 2 will issue a purchase requisition, a PR, indirectly through MRP, which is automatically through plant maintenance orders. It gets triggered and purchase requisition is created. So processing the PR, so basically purchase requisition can get triggered by MRP or a planned order, or it can be created manually. And then we have a procedure to release it. Then we identify the supplier, and then we allocate the process requisition to purchase order or RFQ or release order. That is the process. Request for quotation, which is RFQ, is used in purchasing to compare different vendors before placing an order. So it contains entire information similar to purchase order. Okay. Structure of RFQ is like this: deadlines, messages, vendor data. Okay. Then we have delivery schedules like 10 pieces on this date, 50 pieces on this date, and so on. So processing quotations, we have pricing conditions. Vendor A will have gross price and discount. Vendor B is giving surcharge 20%. Vendor C is giving fixed cost 50%, $50. So basically, on that basis, you actually compare the vendors. Okay. And then you can actually select a vendor or you reject a vendor. So you get a quotation from the vendor. Release strategy basically, what is release strategy? Basically, when you get a PR generated from a department, either you will have the authorization or your manager will have the authorization to release it. So it can be considered and it can upgrade to purchase order, because sometimes you cannot just pass down the PR to everyone in the purchasing department and start processing it. No, it's not like that. It has to go through some channels, proper channels. That is a release strategy. So some managers, for example, if there is a requirement to order $1 million asset, of course, $1 million is a big amount. So it has to go through proper channel. It has to go to the CEO of the company. So, but if you're ordering something like for $10, it's not necessary to take it to the CEO to approve it. So basically, release strategy is the approval strategy to approve as the price or quantity goes up, the authorization network also expands. It goes to the higher ups for authorizations. So this is the release procedure. We actually define conditions. We define the value, as I said, the value is 1 million or $10. Then we have material group and plant. Okay, so does a strategy means for $10, of course, it won't go to the CEO, but only the officer enough can approve it. And release, who is authorized to release it and what order it should be released. Whether first it will be approved by manager, then finance manager, then the CEO. That is the release strategy as the volume and the price tag increases. Then we have indicators, whether it is released or released blocked for ordering, for RFQ, there are different categories. So there will be codes. We'll see how it is done. We'll see it for purchase order. Okay. And then we have release procedure for without classification, where in conditions, we have the value, the price tag, the group, account assignment, category, and plant. Okay. With classification, we have a release group and release conditions. We'll see this. I mean, this is a bit technical. Once we actually get into configuration, then it will be easier to understand. Releasing it, once the purchase requisition is created, the system will actually give you to whether release it or not. Whether it will be released with collective releases like manager, then finance manager, then CO, that is collective release. And when it is released, whether it's individual or collective, it then goes to purchase order and purchasing. Okay. So that was that for today. Thank you.